Here we go.
Oh, I see.
It's on.
It's on. Okay. All right, very good. Well, we're recording, I think. Thanks for coming, everybody. Um, you are at the GLREA, Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association's Ann Arbor Solar Stories. So if this is your first time here, welcome. On Thursday nights, the GLREA has energy events like this. They're 1 hour. They're on Zoom. They may be a Ann Arbor solar story or a Michigan solar story from somewhere else in the state. They could be a clean energy seminar that talks about all things clean energy. So, or a Detroit solar story. So if you're signed up for the Thursday night energy events, you will get notification of each meeting and what the topic is if you want to attend, which is probably how you got here. So welcome. I should also say that the GLREA Solar Stories are sponsored financially by EGLE, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Homeland Solar, Harvest Solar, and Synergy. And I should also say that for those of you who don't know me, I'm Julie Roth. I'm the energy manager at the Office of Sustainability and Innovations for the city of Ann Arbor. And I get the joy of helping bring together these Ann Arbor solar stories from various people in Ann Arbor who have gone solar. And so tonight I am absolutely thrilled that we have Will Hathaway here. If any of you are from Ann Arbor, you may know Hathaway's Hideaway. It's kind of an iconic building right downtown on Ashley Street. And we're going to hear about the building and we're going to hear about this historic building's transformation to be a zero emissions building. And we're so appreciative of Will being here and telling his story. So I'm just going to stop talking and give it over to Will.
Well, thank you. Good evening. I'm Will Hathaway, and I'm glad to be here to represent Hathaway's Hideaway. It's a family-owned venue in downtown Ann Arbor, and I'm particularly pleased to be able to share with you our solar story. Hathaway's Hideaway is located in downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan. It is designated as a commercial property. It is also designated as a historic building overseen by the city's Historic District Commission. The solar story of Hathaway's Hideaway begins in 2020, just as the news of the COVID pandemic was beginning to dominate the news. The building is now all electric, and with the combination of on-site solar and 85% enrollment in the MI Green Power, it is a zero net carbon ZNC building. However, the roots of our solar story go back many years earlier. Let's see here. All right. Now moving from one slide to another. How do I do that? There we go. All right. Sorry about that. Um, Hathaway's Hideaway is located at 310 South Ashley Street. It was constructed by the city in 1901. It was the polling place for Ann Arbor's second ward. The image at right shows voters lined up before the polls opened for the November 1952 election. If you look closely, there's a guy holding up a bumper sticker that says, "I like Ike." The city had not used the space for many years when it decided to auction the building as a surplus property in 1969. John Hathaway was the high bidder. John and Mary rehabilitated the structure while keeping its original character. They furnished it with artifacts that had local connections. John articulated his idea for the space in a 1973 interview. Quote, "We need discussion groups where diverse kinds of people interested in each other as well as the community can get together to laugh, criticize, make suggestions, and generate community attitude and spirit." Hathaway's Hideaway is a nickname that someone else gave the building in the early 1970s, and it stuck. Um, Despite its commercial zoning, the property has never operated as a typical for-profit business. When the Hathaway family loans use of the space to other individuals or groups, we typically ask for a donation to help cover operational costs. Several organizations, such as the Ann Arbor Firefighters Union, hold their regular meetings at Hathaway's Hideaway. John and Mary's first home together was a house on Marshall Court. They chose that little neighborhood because that was where Mary's family had lived when she was born. She had loved living there as a child, and they started their own family there. The picture at right, you can see my mom is the smaller of the two girls sitting on their dad's lap. And if you look in the background, you can see I think a Model T parked on Marshall Court. Um, and the other picture is me sitting on my mom's lap. Um, let's see here. John and Mary eventually moved to the west side of Ann Arbor, but they felt protective of the Marshall Court neighborhood. Over time, they purchased all of the houses that fronted on the court. John managed the properties as near campus rentals. The tenants were a mix of students at the University of Michigan and others seeking affordable housing near the downtown. John and Mary believed in keeping the rents low. They felt it was a shared success whenever their tenants saved enough to move to a home that they purchased themselves. Together, Mary and John acted as stewards, protecting natural land and historic buildings while fostering community building around causes that they cared about. They taught their kids to do what you can to make the world a better place. After John's death in 2001, Mary took responsibility for managing the rental houses. She tackled various maintenance tasks and made improvements, such as adding insulation. She also used the opportunity to promote sustainable energy by having solar panels installed on her childhood home. So you can see in the aerial view the house at the end of the court. And then I think this is a photo that was taken during the installation of the solar panels. Um, Mary was also proud to have solar panels on her own home, which was home built in 1929. And you can see her there gesturing, standing on the landing of the back porch. Mary cared for Hathaway's Hideaway as well. It was among her property management responsibilities. She oversaw improvements, including the skylight replacement, which you can see there, and at the same time repairing the roof, trying to solve the problem of chronic leaks. The heat pump was a suggestion, and for a long time we thought it was just an air conditioning unit, and we didn't understand that it also could act as a heat pump, despite its name. Um, but that came into play later on. By the way, the original skylight, when it was demolished, when the workers were pulling it apart, it was so decrepit that they didn't even need to use tools. They could just pull it apart with their hands. So it was just in time that she replaced that. After Mary's death in October 2019, responsibility shifted to John and Mary's three kids. I serve as the manager for the properties we own together. In early 2020, I learned that the owner of 312 South Ashley, the building immediately south of Hathaway's Hideaway, planned to gut his building and rebuild the interior. This was actually welcome news because it offered a solution to a chronic problem. that occurred during rainstorms and when winter ice and snow melted. Water would leak through the neighboring building into our building. However, the interconnected nature of our roofs meant that demolition of our neighbor's property would compromise the integrity of our roof. And in this photo, you can see um, the building to the south. If you look closely, it says 312 on it. Ours is the roof is, or the property line is outlined in blue. 312 South Ashley was built in the early 1900s, about 15 years after Hathaway's Hideaway. It had been home to a music store and most recently the rock band school. The building had been purchased a few years earlier, along with about 9 other buildings on the block, by a businessman who had already acquired multiple commercial properties in downtown Ann Arbor. Although our roof was not in need of immediate replacement, we decided to view this as an opportunity to partner with the neighboring property owner while simultaneously making the move to solar power for Hathaway's Hideaway. Installing solar panels seemed an appropriate way of honoring Mary Hathaway's commitment to saving the planet. We worked with Homeland Solar to assess whether solar power would be feasible for our building. The conclusion was that solar power would work for Hathaway's Hideaway. Homeland Solar developed a proposal. Everything was being readied for the moment when our neighbor's demolition and rehabilitation was complete. And I put in some of the details of their proposal here. I also noted that it was required that nothing be visible, none of the improvements be visible from the street. And that may be true in other neighborhoods for other reasons, but in our case, it was because of the historic designation of the building. Demolition at the adjacent property progressed through the summer of 2020, and I would monitor the progress going up to our roof to look over across at how it was going because I wanted to, I was curious, but also I wanted to make sure that we were ready when the time came for our own project. Much to my surprise, the contractor for our neighbor crossed the property line. So one day I came and I discovered that our chimney was gone. The flue protruded from the newly constructed wall that had been built by their contractor on top of our building. This was clearly a mistake, I thought. I called the property owner and I won't repeat that conversation, nor will I digress into the litigation that followed. Um, for the purposes of this presentation, the situation prevented kind of a crisis for our solar plans. Well, I presented a crisis beyond the solar plans, actually. Because the gas furnace serving the lower levels of Hathaway's Hideaway vented through the chimney, this aggressive action by the neighboring property owner jeopardized our ability to operate. Fortunately, due to COVID, there were no events or meetings that had to be rescheduled. Everyone was still social distancing. So we moved forward with replacing the furnace with a second heat pump. And we then eventually took the step of terminating gas service to our building. And once we settled the legal dispute and entered another construction season, we were able to proceed with our own project, including the solar panels. So Bloom Roofing was the firm that we hired. They did an excellent job of replacing our second floor roof. And Homeland Solar followed immediately after with the installation of 14 solar panels, which you can see there. And in fact, I think there's another image. This is looking the other direction. So that's looking towards the west, standing near the corner of the front of our building where it abuts the neighbor's building. So now I have some charts and stats, which I will do my best to explain. I know Jan is lurking out there somewhere, I think, in the audience and may be able to pitch in as well. Um, so let's see here. This, well, I don't pretend to be an expert, and I think I can see our solar story in the peaks and valleys of this chart. Energy use was low in 2020 because all events at Hathaway's Hideaway were canceled. In January 2021, the energy use took a seasonal spike for both electricity and gas. Um, and after the second heat pump was installed, gas use ceased until eventually we shut it off completely. So where you see it the graph low for gas, that's just their baseline charge. We weren't actually using gas. That's just what you pay to have it, even if you don't use it. Events began to take place again at Hathaway's Hideaway in 2021. And the electricity use spiked again in the winter 21-22 and again in subsequent winters, but the temperatures I think were less cold, and that's why it's not quite so high. And then the solar panels began service at the beginning of 2024. And so you can see where that line comes in. And this chart shows the reduction in energy consumption. And I'm hoping that the downward trend will continue. And this is a chart showing the reduction in emissions. Again, hoping that that also continues to move downward. This is a chart showing the savings, which is, I guess, part of how you market this to other commercial buildings, encouraging them to make this same shift. In terms of how we would value it, I think more as savings for the planet. And this graph or this illustration shows how much we've sort of saved in terms of emissions. Then I have a graph that I believe shows the seasonal variation. Now, if I understand this correctly, I think this is the variation in energy production versus energy use. And Jan, when she and I were talking about this, she said that this might point towards Hathaway's Hideaway adding battery storage capacity so that we could take advantage of the energy that's produced during the warmer months, during when we really need it during the colder months. And Jan also suggested that we might seek Energy Star Next Gen certification for commercial buildings. She thinks that Hathaway's Hideaway may meet the criteria for energy performance and emissions target and renewable energy. So in conclusion, despite the challenges that we encountered in embarking on our solar story, we succeeded in converting historic Hathaway's Hideaway to an exemplary net zero building. We now have a full year of data showing our success, and I hope we can sustain and build on that strong start. Are there Any other questions? If Jan's lurking out there, she could probably explain the charts better than me.
Jan, do you want Will to go back to any charts or to stop sharing and we can all kind of come in together? Jan is muted, so she may or may not be listening to us talk.
Well, I know she was
She
juggling
was
another
here.
meeting.
Why don't you go ahead and stop sharing and we can take questions until she maybe pops in.
Okay, let me see here. All right.
Um, Thank you for that. Yeah, we will open up the floor for questions. I have one right off the bat, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I was really interested to see that your monthly costs remained stable and even but kind of reduced when you switched from gas plus electric to all electric, which isn't what we always see. And I'm wondering, did you also do anything in regards to insulating the building or the envelope of the building when you switched to the heat pumps, or it's just, or that wasn't touched?
No, we did insulate when we finally got around to replacing the roof. But ironically, we had thinking that we were going to be starting in 2020. Um, uh, some members of the Homeland Solar team removed the insulation that we had, which was very old and sort of, those rolls of insulation that were sort of just stapled up in the roof. So they pulled that out in anticipation of replacing the roof. And so we were basically uninsulated on the second floor for, from 2020 until 2023.
Well, it's nice to see that cost remain stable. You know, your operational cost, that's great. That's amazing. There's maybe that's that old building with whatever it was made out of. I
Well,
don't-
we one of the things that we're aware of is that we do have kind of insulation from our neighbors
Oh,
because
no.
we're surrounded
Yep.
by buildings owned by this guy. Now he owns them.
Yeah,
um,
that makes sense.
we sort of have this ambient heat from, Cosmos Deli and the other business next door.
Yeah, that's great. I also am curious. I don't know. I know that you, so you had the restriction and Homeland is here too. I think they may know this. I don't know, but um, that you weren't allowed to see any solar panels from the street because it was a historic district. And I haven't worked with businesses in historic districts, but I have worked with residences in historic districts. And a few years back, worked with the historic district to um, modify their requirements for residential. They used to have a requirement that you couldn't see it from the street, and now they do allow street facing solar on a residential building in a historic district as long as it meets certain specifications, all black panels and symmetrical and what have you. So I don't know if that would be any different now for commercial or not, but that was a small advancement. So other questions? I see Harvey.
Oh, I think it's muted.
You are muted, Harvey.
I am muted. So I do have a question. Yes. So very impressive. And I am curious, as Ann Arbor becomes her own power utility for the city, um, how is the cost structure going to be handled between somebody that's net positive and the city of Ann Arbor buying power? How's that relationship going to work?
Are you, I assume this question is for me and not for Will.
I
Well, I don't
certainly
know who it's from. I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'm
Um,
just curious.
are you asking about the like so how DTE right now pays you
No,
about
no, 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 not
50% of your
DTE.
right, I
I
know.
know how they do that.
Right.
So
Are you
I'm asking the future, the
yes,
city
I
of Ann
understand.
Arbor, when the city of Ann Arbor becomes their own private utility or
The
public
sustainable energy
utility.
utility you're talking about,
Yeah.
right? Yes.
How is that relationship between Hathaway Hideaway and the new Ann Arbor utility
Mhm.
entity going to work?
Yep, I can explain that. So, first of all, people can still own their own solar just as they are, and they can still feed back into DTE's grid. So right away, Hathaway's Hideaway will have its own solar and keep operating exactly the way it is. People who sign up newly for the sustainable energy utility will be able to get solar put on their roofs from the city, from this new utility, and get billed for the amount of solar that they are receiving from the solar panels so they'll have a bill from the sustainable energy utility, and they'll also have a bill from DTE, because at nighttime or when they aren't producing enough power, they will be pulling from the grid. If they have a battery, that will be very little that they'll be pulling from the grid.
But
I,
what happens when he sends power to the Ann Arbor utility?
Well, he would only send power to the Ann Arbor's SEU when we get to the point of, in a certain neighborhood or area, that there's enough density that we can start microgridding within that area. So the first tranche is going to be putting up solar and storage to residents and buildings that want it, like the school systems and people who haven't uh, gone solar on their own. And then when we start getting density in certain areas, we'll be able to have shared battery storage and microgrid in those areas. The exact cost ratio of what people will be, people won't be receiving money individually because they're just being billed for the solar that they're using, right? So how that all the finances are going to work exactly is well beyond my pay grade. And
Okay, but at
right.
some point, it would seem that Hathaway Hideaway, I'm going to make it up, a bright sunny day in May where there's, you're in shoulder season, you're not a lot of air conditioning, not a lot of cooling. So he's going to make more power than he's using from his solar.
Right.
And so is that going to be something that's going to go back to DTE, or is this Ann Arbor Solar utility going to buy it, or how's that all going to work?
At first, it'll go back to DTE because he's just like he is. It's not going to affect him. But then if there's a bunch of solar going up on, let's say, that little strip of buildings where Hathaway's is and in the surrounding area, and we start microgridding, right? So sharing solar amongst all of those. And if Will decides to sell back his solar to the microgrid instead of to DTE, if we have a microgrid there, then there will be a financial reimbursement for that excess solar that he's generating and putting into the microgrid. What that reimbursement looks like is, it's too soon, I don't know, but it would be, instead of selling it to the big DTE grid, he would be able to sell it to the microgrid, but again, that's some years in the future.
Okay, but fundamentally, the microgrid has to exist first.
Yeah,
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
yeah,
Thanks.
you're welcome. It's complicated, I know. I saw another hand, I thought, that was up and came down.
Might have been because there were two Harveys on this rare situation.
Oh, two Harveys.
It was me, but Harvey asked the same question in a better way than I could.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Yeah, Tom.
Again, unmuted here. Will, I was curious, I'm always interested in how a project like the one you've gone through and the kind of purposes you have in having the Hathaway operation. You've always tried to focus on community improvement or opportunities or sharing. Have you been able to do that with the solar activity that you've been involved with as a, kind of an example to others? And has that have you been able to do that as a kind of core activity, maybe in conjunction with the city itself or with others that are interested in the solar programs?
that I would be happy to do that. I guess view this as kind of a first step in that direction.
I guess, Julie, I'd ask you as a follow-up to that, does the city have any sort of a style of plan that would relate to that
Yeah.
communicate,
Well,
sharing?
yeah. So we've been working more on thinking through our commercial building decarbonization strategies, and Jan is on here, but she might be stuck on mute. I'm not sure, but Jan Culbertson of the 2030 district. This is what they do, right? They are working with commercial businesses throughout the city on decarbonization. And we worked with the 2030 district a few years back to create a commercial solar program um, that Homeland was part of us helping set that up. And I think actually, I thought I saw somebody else on the call who's part of that program. But essentially, this was a program where um, commercial entities looking to go solar could come to the 2030 district site. They could read about case studies from various installers and various building types, and they have visuals, and they have, cost paybacks and impacts and things, all the technical specifications. Read about case studies that they might see themselves in. They can request free technical assistance through the 20 district that would help do like a feasibility look at, if your property is appropriate for solar, if they got bids and estimates, could help them understand it, and would also help them look at their bills after the solar was installed and producing, and then a year later to see and make sure that, the assumptions that were made up front are actually manifesting. So it's this free technical support for commercial entities. So that was one thing that we did, but we didn't know about Hathaway's Hideaway, or they weren't part of that that initial example on, one of those featured sort of projects at the time, but that is possible. We're also, the 2030 district goes beyond solar, and they look really at commercial buildings in general and how to reduce their energy use and become more sustainable. So I didn't know, Will. I think it's fascinating that you ended up going all electric because you had to, because someone took out your chimney. That is just fascinating, and kind of horrific that happened, um, and bewildering that it didn't just get fixed right away. Whatever. Yeah, you said that's a longer story for another time, but what a bonus that you had to go all electric, and then you did, and then you are a great demonstration of how you are an older building with all the quirks and characteristics that older buildings have, and you were able to make this swap without a whole lot of pain, which is I mean, you had pain, I'm sure, but without a whole lot of like cost pain in terms of operational costs and so forth. So I think that's a pretty interesting, cool story that I didn't even know till now. And I agree, this is the first step in helping to share that story.
And we have a venue where we
Yeah.
could gather now that it's safe to do so. In some ways it's really nice to have that in the rearview mirror. I hope that situation doesn't recur, but if people wanted to hold some kind of an event to promote downtown solar conversions and needed a location, we've got one as long as, the interest isn't, too excessive to go beyond our capacity.
Will,
What
I
is your
love that.
capacity, Will?
Well, it's interesting. We have the firefighters union meets at our building, but we don't have an imposed limit on how many people can be there from the fire marshal. So we have sort of a comfort level that we suggest of beyond 100 people at once, it becomes kind of um, claustrophobic a little. harder to move around. So we encourage people to sort of, use that as a rough limit. But if it was an open house, you could have presumably more people come and go.
And Will, on a follow-up on that, can you see all the equipment, the heat pumps outside, the heat pump, the heads on the inside, water heaters, things like that? Can people see that kind of equipment?
Um, it's interesting. So the building was built in 1901. It doesn't have a lot of mechanical to it. For example, there's no running water on the second floor.
Hmm.
And the hot water heater really services just the bathroom sink on the first floor. So it's a little electric hot water heater that has been there since that bathroom was installed. But yeah, I'm guessing that in 1901, the original bathroom was probably an outhouse. But we're much more modern now. It is possible to sort of step out onto the lower roof where the uh, skylight is located and look up and see the solar panels, and you can certainly see both of the heat pumps are there. The rest of the mechanicals that support it are there on the second floor, I believe. But there's other than that, there's not much that you can see. So it takes a little bit of effort to see the solar panels.
Mhm.
But
Is there a kitchen?
um, no, there's not. We have caterers that bring things in, and that is one of the improvements I'm hoping to make is to make it more easier for caterers to use. So we still have some other improvements we have in mind, but given our limitations as a sort of donations to cover operational costs operation, we don't have a lot of capital to work with.
Well, I'm going to keep the idea in mind of using it as an event space for city-sponsored things that have to do with climate and sustainability. It's really good to know that that is an option. John Sarver.
Well, you may have kind of answered my question, Will. I was wondering if there's any further additional improvements that you've been kind of thinking about, maybe that you can make to the building, or have you kind of maybe done as much as you can?
No, I think we can do more. The um, the plumbing that exists on the first floor, I think, could be improved to make it, you know, just that alone. If the sink and the bar on the first floor was more functional, I think that could help caterers a lot. I think boosting the electrical capacity, if we did that, so that I guess I'm not an expert on catering either, but I think there's some different kinds of sort of warming ovens and so on that if we made it if we upped our capacity a bit, we could have those kinds of that kind of equipment. Um, so this is something that I'm sort of a long-term goal of making it more useful for caterers to come in and use the space.
Michael.
I had a question about the heat pump. Is the heat pump a mini split or is it ducted?
Well, that's a good question.
Do you have ducts?
Do you have, in your room, do you have things up on the wall that the heat comes out of?
Oh, okay. So I think we have one of each. We have on the second floor, we have the unit that's sort of on the wall, and the heat comes out of it. Um, and that's the one that my mom installed back in 2014 when she had the work done around the skylight. And then the second heat pump, the one that was installed under stress to replace the furnace downstairs operates through the ductwork.
Okay, thank you.
More questions for Will?
Well, if this group wants to hold an in-person meeting at any point, we be happy to have you come and see Hathaway's Hideaway in person.
What about parking?
Well,
There are parking structures downtown. Yeah.
there are places to park nearby. Ann Arbor's downtown sometimes gets so busy that you can spend some time looking for a parking place. One of the advantages of Sundays is that parking is free, and it tends to be less busy. So if people have an event that can be scheduled on a Sunday, I suggest that date or that day of the week as an option.
Harvey,
Yeah, that was essentially my question. More pointedly, I was going to ask, do you recommend a particular time or day that we could stop by and get a tour?
Oh,
Show us the ducted heat pump, various things that you have alluded to.
I'm happy to schedule a time for people to come and tour. We don't have hours at Hathaway's Hideaway, so it's all by appointment.
Right. So maybe we could come up with a Sunday 2 o'clock or something like that.
That would be great. I would be happy to do that.
you could do a GLREA field trip.
That's right.
Exactly. And we'll hold hands as we cross the street.
Everyone bring a sack lunch.
And follow John.
Tom, go ahead.
On mute again here. I was just thinking, a while ago, we had a presentation by the ice cream shop, and
Washtenaw Dairy.
and so Washtenaw Dairy, and we've had, number of others from Ann Arbor as examples of very interesting kinds of programs. And it seems to me it really is a wonderful basis of location and so forth that would be a wonderful, sharing place for that type of effort.
We could organize a commercial solar power tour or something.
Oh, you're speaking my love language. Washtenaw Dairy, yeah, they were here as well, and they also have done extensive work on reducing their energy use, switching to some heat pumps. They have all this refrigeration, right? And they've done some just big work at reducing their energy use intensity. So, yeah, we could go walk from Washtenaw Dairy over to Hathaway's Hideaway. That's walkable. And find some others. I love it.
Eat your ice cream as you go.
Yeah, that's right. I think I see something in the chat. Has John Roos ever presented to GLREA? I don't think so. Roos Roast. Craig, what do you know about?
Now you're speaking my love language.
Craig, what do you know about Roos Roast's building?
Well, I don't think they have solar downtown, but I know the Rosewood location has solar on its roof.
I think I remember them talking to me about that years ago, and so they must have done it. Yeah. Oh, that's good to know.
Julie?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I was reluctant. I was thinking about the Washtenaw Dairy presentation, but I was wondering, do they have much to see? Because their stuff is, their panels are on a flat roof and they're angled and you can't see them from once you go up on the roof. Is there more that would be viewable if we did a field trip there?
It's a good question. I'm not sure how much you'd be able to see.
That's what got me to
yeah.
talk about taking a field trip to the Hideaway.
Hathaways. Yep.
It seems that there are vantage points from which you could see
hmm
everything that's salient.
And Will, are you guys, I don't know what the boundaries of the DDA are, but are you part of the Downtown Development Authority, like the DDA
Oh
district?
yeah, we're in the DDA.
Yeah, because I know they're very active as well, and I wonder if Hathaway's Hideaway could be an example for other building owners within the DDA, because then you're talking commercial to commercial sort of structures, which could be interesting. One of the difficulties about commercial buildings and decarbonization is, unlike Hathaway's, many of them are occupied by a business that does not own the building. And so you have this split incentive where the building owner could make improvements like putting solar on, but then it's their investment. And oftentimes it's the tenant, the business, that pays the electricity bills, which sets up them having to then do a green lease or change sort of the way that they are operating their leases and their tenancies, which is not impossible to do. It's definitely doable, but you have to be a pretty motivated building owner that's motivated by, you know, climate and doing this. And a lot of them are just, you know, that's just not on their radar. It's not something that they're going to invest in, most likely. We're hoping that the sustainable energy utility changes that a bit, because in that case, the building owner doesn't have to invest anything. They can just agree to have solar on the roof, and then the electricity bills go down for the tenant, and the building is, you know, has a reduced carbon footprint. So we're hoping that we see greater commercial building adoption with the SEU, when that initial investment that is hard to figure out how to get back is no longer part of the equation, if that makes sense. But Hathaway's, you know, owns it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not aggressively trying to make money either. We're just trying to cover our costs. But I think the fact that we could sort of honor my mom's memory by doing something like this, I'm sure she would have supported moving forward with it. She'd already done it on a rental property. And actually, what you were just saying reminds me that I realized after I took over management of the rental properties after she passed away that she hadn't really passed the cost on to the tenants. So all of a sudden, they just didn't have to pay utility bills. All they had to pay was, actually, it wasn't fully electric, so they still had to pay their gas bills, but
Your mother sounds like a pretty remarkable person.
yeah, it was very nice.
Do you have a legacy plan for the building?
A legacy planned.
I mean, like what's gonna, you know, like, you know, who comes after you? Is there a plan for continuing to maintain this in the family or with the mission?
Well, it's interesting. The answer is no. I mean, other than you know, we have, you know, wills. I own it together with my brother and sister. So in some ways, you know, if we had a plan, it would have to be all of us together making a plan. But the rental properties on Marshall Court that my parents assembled and protected. I don't know if people know, but the university bought everything on that block. So we sort of sold under pressure to the university, and everything is going to be torn down to make way for new dormitories along Division Street. The first one's already going up on Elbel Field. You know, unfortunately, all of that effort to protect that little neighborhood, well, they protected it for a long time. But I guess if it was going to go some other way, a university dormitory is probably the way that my parents would have wanted it to go. But yeah, that we were wrestling before that happened with what to do because it's not clear who would take over management. Neither my sister or my brother are really interested in managing properties. So in some ways it solved a problem for the university to come in and buy that. But in preparing for this presentation, I started thinking about those solar panels on the rental property on Marshall Court. And I reached out to find out if there was a plan for those before the university demolished the house. And actually, I was told that they are going to retrieve those solar panels for some purpose, some use before they knock the house down.
That's good news. I see
Well,
Jay.
Well, I hope that the university thinks about incorporating solar and maybe even geothermal when they build a new dormitory, because that would be enlightened thinking. And maybe they should be checking in with Jan, with an architect who thinks along these terms in terms of building structure and style and the engineering systems within it.
I know that University of
So,
Michigan has a very aggressive climate plan. And I know they're doing geothermal in existing
Yeah.
buildings. I
Yep.
know on North Campus that's happening, and so I don't know what they're doing with new buildings construction, but
yeah, if you go out to North Campus, right there's a brand new engineering building and there's a big sign that talks about geothermal that's heating and cooling that brand new building that's up
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Will the dormitory be presenting any shadow to your solar panels?
Oh,
Oh, that's a different area.
yeah, it's a
Oh,
different
okay,
area.
they're far apart.
Yeah.
Because he who draws their power from solar first has a legal leg up on whether a taller building may block them or shadow them, and there can be some rather interesting zoning issues regarding that.
Well, that'd be interesting to see what happens. I think the buildings that surround our building on Ashley Street, um, one of them may also be a protected historic building. The one that had the demolition where they built next door is not itself a historic building, but I think it's designated a contributing building. So they are regulated by the historic district to some degree. But obviously, one of the things I learned in this process is the Historic District Commission has very little control over the kind of conflict that was occurring behind the facades. If there was something that they were doing that was, interfering with the facade of our building, how it looked from the street, then the Historic District Commission might have had some role to play, but they didn't know what to do about a historic chimney being knocked over and removed.
Anybody else? We only have 6 minutes left for the meeting, so if there are any questions, now is your chance, or comments. I see Larry here, Larry Kerber from Homeland. Hi, Larry. Was Larry involved, Larry Kerber
Oh,
involved
yeah.
in putting your panels up? Yep. Hi, Larry.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Dave,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I've had the
Oh.
honor of being involved not only with Hathaway, Hideaway, but also with Washtenaw Dairy.
Yep, you do
So it's
Washtenaw Dairy. And you're doing a
yeah,
whole bunch in the city and a bunch on the schools. Homeland's been kind of everywhere, I think.
yep.
Yep. And I just met a new neighbor that apparently you put theirs up too, so. Dave, Curtis, go ahead.
I just wonder, Will, overall, would you say that Ann Arbor, the city, has been cooperative with all your improvements, or has there been an obstacle?
Oh, the city hasn't been an obstacle to the improvements that we've made to the building. I think, everything, any changes that we've made that required permitting or anything like that, everything went pretty smoothly. I think there was an inspection to make sure that that there was enough room around the panels that you could sort of make your way all the way around them. That the distance would, met code. Um, we get fire inspections now, and got, useful input, and we've made some improvements. So my experience is the city, in whatever way we've had to interact with them, has been very cooperative. The only, the only thing I wish the city had been a little bit more firm about was when our neighbor, decided to encroach onto our building, rebuilding their building on top of ours. The building department let them modify their um, building plans that had been submitted to basically sort of retroactively show what they had already done.
Mm.
Their original building plans did not show them crossing the line and building on top of our building. So but I only have this one little building, and the guy who owns the building next door owns, many buildings in downtown Ann Arbor. So I'm sure he has a lot much, more. He and his contractor have much more interaction with the city than I do.
Another question from Lee.
Yeah, I live near Tecumseh, Michigan, and it's my understanding that Tecumseh has a solar access permit. And so if you want to put solar on your house and you think your neighbors might do something that would block the sun, you can acquire that permit. It doesn't influence anything up to 10 feet, but then from 10 feet at a 30-degree angle going south, it says, that your neighbor would be violating the permit that you received to have access to the sun. And he's limited in that way, for the future. Now, of course, if the thing already exists and causes shade on your lot,
You can't make them tear it
you
down.
can't make them remove it. But if you apply for a permit and the sun is there in your space, then according to these rules, there's a restriction on people in the neighborhood, you might say.
Absolutely.
So that would be something for if it's really a useful thing and a lawyer looks at it and said, wow, it might stand up in court. That would be something that GLREA could have on their website for somebody to say, is he just going to build something in front of it or let a tree grow? And the answer could be in the ordinance for the city. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. I don't know if that's jurisdiction by jurisdiction. I don't know that there's a state law preempting that. I'm not familiar with laws around that. One of the Johns, are you?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar either. I mean, I'd have to think on it.
I don't think any state legislation has passed, because there has been state legislation passed in other states. But over the years, there's been kind of talk about it or mention, but I don't think has ever been a priority or a strong push.
I think it's pretty complicated because especially like Ann Arbor is trying to densify its downtown to prevent sprawl and decrease housing costs. And that's sort of the momentum that is going on. So it could really come into conflict there if that were true. But it could, and it's just, locality by locality that has
Well,
that.
this is a city ordinance, and of course,
Mhm.
if it doesn't, if the access doesn't exist, you can't get the permit.
Mhm.
It's not a right. it's something you can apply for and add it to the responsibilities of the neighborhood. So
Interesting.
never
Interesting.
been, never been, never been tested in court.
You know, as we get more solar systems installed, this may become an issue at some point, you know. Would think it would become. It's probably just when, not if. Yeah.
Just waiting to happen. Well, it is 8 o'clock and I want to respect everybody's time, especially Will, who came to tell your story. Thank you so much for coming. I learned a lot about Hathaway's Hideaway and your story. I was there, I've been there a couple of times for like maybe a political candidate once that had a little gathering there, and I can't remember what else, something else. And it is a special place, you guys, walking around in there. There's these big old wooden like bar, I think, and the photographs on the walls. It's really a piece of history that's pretty special. And I love that this piece of history has kept up in regards to sustainability. So it's both historic and progressive at the same time. That's pretty cool. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and share your story, Will. I really, really do appreciate it. And I'm going to keep in mind everything that you said about using that event space and thinking of ways that we can highlight that event space in the name of sustainability in Ann Arbor. I am going to take you up on that. So I
Great.
appreciate it.
Well, you know where to find me.
I do. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Have a great rest of your
Good
evening.
night.
Bye, all.